I just signed the biggest contract in company history, $50 million that literally saved us from bankruptcy. The next morning, my boss called me into his office and said, "We need people with elite degrees moving forward." He glanced at my state college diploma with pure disgust. I thanked him for the opportunity and walked out without a single word of protest. But they had no idea that the client meeting tomorrow morning would become their worst nightmare. My name is Dennis Thompson, and for 6 years, I'd been the top sales performer at Morrison & Associates. While my colleagues with their Ivy League degrees schmooze at company parties, I was closing deals. 12 to 14 hours a day, every single day. My Harvard-educated colleagues would leave at 5 sharp, but I stayed until the cleaning crew arrived, perfecting presentations and building relationships that actually mattered. Last Tuesday, I came home at 11 p.m. to find my wife Sarah already asleep. I crept into my daughter Emma's room and watched her sleep through the crack in the door. She's 7 now, and sometimes I feel like I'm watching her grow up through glimpses between meetings. Sarah had left a note on the kitchen counter. Emma asked why Daddy only sees her in pictures anymore. That hit harder than any missed promotion. But this Johnson Industries deal was different. This was the one that would change everything. 6 months I'd been chasing them. A manufacturing giant looking to expand their West Coast operations. 3 competitors were bidding, including our biggest rival, Blackstone Corp. Everyone said Johnson Industries was impossible to crack. They'd burned through 4 consulting firms in 2 years. The breakthrough came during what should have been a routine presentation. While presenting our logistics proposal, Mr. Johnson mentioned something that made my ears perk up. They weren't just expanding to California. They were planning a complete Southeast Asian operation launch within 18 months. This wasn't public knowledge. This was insider information that could reshape our entire proposal. I spent the next 2 weeks rebuilding everything from scratch. Missed Emma's school play because I was on a conference call with suppliers in Singapore. Skipped our anniversary dinner because Johnson's CFO could only meet that night. Sarah stopped asking when I'd be home. The night before the final presentation, I was in the office at 2 a.m. when I overheard something strange. My boss, Marcus Williams, was on the phone in his office, door cracked open just enough for his voice to carry. "Once this deal closes, we'll restructure the entire department. Yeah, Dennis did good work, but we need people who fit our image moving forward." Something cold settled in my stomach, but I pushed it aside. The presentation went flawlessly. Johnson Industries signed on the spot. $50 million over 3 years, with options for expansion. The biggest contract in our company's 15-year history. Marcus shook my hand with a smile that didn't reach his eyes and said, "Good work, Dennis. We'll celebrate tomorrow." But there was no celebration. Instead, hushed conversation stopped when I walked by. Emails that used to include me suddenly didn't. My access to the Johnson Industries folder was mysteriously revoked. When I asked Marcus about it, he said, "Don't worry about it. We've got it handled from here." Have you ever worked so hard for something that when you finally achieve it, everyone else acts like you're suddenly invisible? That evening, I told Sarah about the weird vibes at work. She was feeding Emma dinner while I sat at our kitchen table. Finally home before 8 p.m. for the first time in months. "Honey, you just landed the biggest deal of your career. Maybe they're planning a surprise celebration?" But something in her voice told me she was worried too. The next morning brought more strange signals. I arrived at 7:30, my usual time, But the conference room where we typically held our Monday morning meetings was empty. I checked my calendar. The meeting was still there, but when I walked past Marcus's office, I could hear voices inside. My entire team was there, having the meeting without me. I caught my colleague Lisa Chen by the coffee machine later. We'd been friends since her first day 3 years ago, and she looked uncomfortable when she saw me. "Dennis, can I ask you something? Are you looking for other opportunities?" "What do you mean?" Be careful, okay? I heard some things." She glanced around nervously. "Marcus has been asking weird questions about your client relationships. And yesterday, I saw a Harvard MBA's resume on his desk with notes in the margins. That afternoon, I was excluded from a strategy meeting about the Johnson Industries implementation. When I asked Marcus directly, he said, 'We're just handling some administrative details. Nothing that requires your input right now.'" Administrative details. For the deal I'd spent 6 months building from scratch, I started paying closer attention. In the break room, conversation stopped when I approached. Emails about the Johnson Industries project went to everyone except me. When I tried to access the shared drive folder, I got an error message. Permission denied. That evening, Emma asked me something that broke my heart. We were building a puzzle together. One of the few times I'd been home early enough to see her before bedtime. "Daddy, why do the people at your work not like you anymore?" "What makes you think that, sweetheart?" "When Mommy calls your work, they sound mean to her now, and you look sad all the time." Out of the mouths of babes, even my 7-year-old could sense something was wrong. The final confirmation came Thursday evening. I was working late, as usual, when I heard my name mentioned in Marcus's office. The door was slightly ajar, and Marcus was on speakerphone with someone from HR. "The restructuring needs to happen immediately after the Johnson contract is fully executed. Dennis has been useful, but he doesn't fit our long-term vision. We need people with better credentials representing us to clients of this caliber." "What about his relationship with Johnson Industries?" the HR voice asked. "Johnson signed with the company, not with Dennis personally. We'll introduce them to Sarah Morrison from our Harvard program. Much better optics." My hands were shaking as I quietly backed away from the door. 6 years of loyalty, of 60-hour weeks, of missing birthdays and anniversaries and school plays, all reduced to better optics. That night, I lay awake next to Sarah, staring at the ceiling. She'd asked why I was so quiet at dinner. But how could I explain that my entire career was about to be flushed away by people who valued pedigree over performance? But here's the thing about being underestimated. It gives you certain advantages. While Marcus was planning his restructuring, I was quietly making copies of important files, client contact information, project timelines, competitor analysis, not to steal, just to protect myself. And during those 6 months of building the Johnson Industries relationship, I'd learned something that Marcus and his Harvard buddies didn't know. Mr. Johnson hated it when companies pulled bait-and-switch tactics with personnel. His previous consulting firm had promised him their top negotiator, then switched him to a junior associate mid-project. Johnson Industries walked away from a $40 million deal over it. He'd mentioned this to me over dinner during our final negotiation session, calling it a matter of respect and trust. Friday morning arrived with an email that made my blood run cold. "Dennis, please see me in my office at 9 a.m. Marcus. I knew what was coming. But they had no idea what was coming for them. The walk to Marcus's office felt like a death march. His secretary avoided eye contact, which told me everything. Inside, Marcus sat behind his mahogany desk with that fake sympathetic expression executives practice in the mirror. "Dennis, please sit down. I'm afraid I have some difficult news." I sat quietly, hands folded, waiting for the performance to begin. The company is going through a strategic restructuring. We're transitioning to a new business model that requires a different skill set in our client-facing roles. He paused dramatically, as if this wasn't a rehearsed speech. "Unfortunately, your position is being eliminated." "I see." My voice was completely calm, which seemed to throw him off. "Now, this isn't a reflection of your work quality. You've done adequate work, but we're moving towards serving a more sophisticated client base. We need people with elite educational backgrounds, people who can relate to our high net worth clients on their level." He gestured toward my degree hanging on the wall, State University, summa cum laude. Nothing wrong with state schools, of course. But when you're sitting across from Harvard MBAs and Stanford executives, credentials matter. The condescension was so thick I could taste it. Here was a man who'd never closed a deal over $1 million, lecturing me about client relationships, while I'd just delivered $50 million to save his job. "I understand," I said simply. This clearly wasn't the reaction he expected. Marcus frowned, probably hoping for begging or anger, something to justify his decision. "You'll receive 2 weeks severance, and we'll provide positive references for your job search. I'm sure you'll find something more suitable to your background." I stood up and extended my hand. "Thank you for the opportunity, Marcus. I'll clear out my desk today." He shook my hand with obvious relief. "I'm glad you're taking this so professionally, Dennis. Not everyone handles these transitions with such maturity." As I walked toward the door, I turned back with a smile. "Oh, one more thing. About the Johnson Industries meeting on Monday morning. What about it?" "Good luck." The look of confusion on his face was perfect. He had no idea what that meant, but something in my tone made him nervous. I spent the rest of the day quietly packing my personal items while my soon-to-be former colleagues avoided me like I had something contagious. But I wasn't bitter. I was calculating. That evening, I sat in my home office and composed a very important email. The timestamp would show 2:47 a.m., after I'd technically been terminated, but before the news had spread. "Mr. Johnson, I hope this message finds you well. I wanted to personally reach out regarding some important changes at Morrison & Associates that will affect your project. As someone who values transparency and honest business relationships, I felt you should hear this directly from me, rather than in Monday's meeting. There are some significant developments that I believe you should be aware of before moving forward. Would you have time for a brief conversation this weekend? I think you'll find it quite illuminating. Best regards, Dennis Thompson." I hit send and leaned back in my chair. Chess players call it a discovered attack, when moving one piece reveals a more powerful piece behind it. Marcus thought he was playing checkers, but I'd been playing chess all along. The response came Saturday morning at 6 a.m. "Dennis, I was very concerned to receive your email. Yes, let's talk immediately. I'll call you in 1 hour." When my phone rang, Mr. Johnson's voice was tense. "Dennis, what's going on over there?" "Well, sir, I'm no longer with Morrison & Associates as of yesterday. They terminated my position as part of a restructuring to bring in people with what they called elite educational backgrounds. I thought you should know before Monday's implementation meeting, since you'll be working with an entirely new team. The silence on the other end stretched for nearly 30 seconds. They fired you. The person who negotiated our entire agreement? Yes, sir. I was told that someone with a Harvard MBA would be better suited to manage client relationships at your level. Another long pause. When Johnson spoke again, his voice was ice cold. Dennis, I think you and I need to have a face-to-face conversation. Are you available for lunch today? Sunday evening, I was home playing board games with Emma when my phone started ringing. Sarah called from the kitchen. Honey, it's Marcus. He sounds upset. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again and again. Emma looked up from our Monopoly game. Daddy, why is your phone so angry? Sometimes grown-ups make bad choices, sweetheart, and then they realize their mistakes too late. The voicemail messages were increasingly frantic. First Marcus, then the CEO, then even HR, all asking me to call back immediately, all using words like urgent and critical situation. But I was exactly where I needed to be, sitting on my living room floor, teaching my daughter that buying Boardwalk isn't always the smartest investment. While my former colleagues spent their Sunday evening in a conference room, probably for the first time in their careers, trying to figure out how to explain to their biggest client why his primary contact had vanished overnight. Monday morning was going to be very interesting indeed. Have you ever watched someone play with fire and wondered when they'd realize they were about to get burned? Because Marcus Williams was about to discover that adequate performance and elite credentials are two very different things. And Mr. Johnson was about to teach him a lesson about respect that they don't cover in business school. Monday morning, 9 a.m. sharp. I was at home making Emma's breakfast when my phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. Dennis, what did you do? Marcus is freaking out, and the conference room looks like a war zone. I smiled as I poured orange juice into Emma's cup. Daddy, why are you happy when your phone buzzes now? She asked, tilting her head with that curious expression kids get when they notice something different. Because sometimes, sweetheart, when you do the right thing, good things happen. At exactly 9:15 a.m., my phone rang. Marcus. I let it ring through to voicemail, then listened to his panicked message. Dennis, we have a serious problem. Mr. Johnson is asking for you specifically, and he seems upset. Please call me back immediately. We can work something out. 20 minutes later, another call. This time from CEO Richard Morrison himself. Dennis, this is Richard. I need you to call me back right now. We're in a very delicate situation with Johnson Industries, and we need your help to resolve it. I deleted both messages and took Emma to school. As we walked hand in hand to her classroom, she skipped beside me, chattering about her upcoming art project. For the first time in months, I wasn't checking my phone every 30 seconds or mentally rehearsing client presentations. I was just a dad walking his daughter to school. Mr. Thompson? Emma's teacher, Mrs. Garcia, approached us at the classroom door. I just wanted to say how nice it is to see you at drop-off. Emma's been telling everyone how her daddy's been home for dinner 3 nights in a row now. 3 nights in a row. What a sad commentary on my previous priorities. The real fireworks started around 10 a.m. My phone began ringing nonstop. Marcus, Richard Morrison, HR Director Janet Walsh, even some of my former colleagues. I turned it off and went for a walk in the neighborhood park where Sarah and I used to bring Emma when she was learning to walk. When I finally turned my phone back on at noon, there were 17 missed calls and a text message that made me laugh out loud. Dennis, Johnson Industries is threatening to cancel the entire contract. Whatever you told him, we need to fix this. Name your price. Marcus. Name my price. The same man who told me I didn't fit their image was now begging me to save his career. That afternoon, while I was researching potential job opportunities, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw a man in an expensive suit carrying a briefcase. When I opened the door, he extended his hand with a warm smile. Mr. Thompson? I'm David Chen, senior partner at Johnson Industries. Mr. Johnson sent me to speak with you personally. We sat in my living room, the same room where I'd worked countless late nights on Johnson Industries proposals while my family slept upstairs. David Chen was nothing like what I expected from a Fortune 500 executive. He was relaxed, genuine, and spoke to me like an equal rather than someone reading from a corporate script. Dennis, Mr. Johnson wanted me to convey how impressed he's been with your work over the past 6 months. But more importantly, he's disgusted by how Morrison and Associates has treated you. I appreciate that, Mr. Chen, but what's done is done. Actually, that's why I'm here. Johnson Industries has been expanding rapidly, and we've been looking for someone to head up our new business development division. Someone who understands relationship building, who values substance over style. He leaned forward. Someone who keeps their word and doesn't play games with personnel changes. The offer was stunning. Nearly double my Morrison and Associates salary, plus equity, plus a signing bonus that would cover Emma's college fund. But more than the money, it was the respect. David Chen was offering me a leadership position based on my track record, not my pedigree. There's one condition, he continued. Mr. Johnson wants you to know that we'll be terminating our contract with Morrison and Associates effective immediately. He considers their treatment of you a breach of trust. Mr. Chen, I don't want to be responsible for other people losing their jobs. Dennis, this isn't about revenge. This is about business principles. Mr. Johnson has built his company on loyalty and merit. He won't work with organizations that don't share those values. That evening at dinner, I shared the news with Sarah and Emma. Sarah's eyes filled with tears when I told her about the salary increase and the promise of normal working hours. But Emma's reaction was the best. Daddy, does this mean you'll be home for my piano recital next month? Yes, sweetheart. I'll be front row center. The next morning brought a parade of increasingly desperate phone calls from Morrison and Associates. First Marcus, then the CEO, then board members I'd never even met. The contract cancellation had sent shockwaves through the entire company. $50 million doesn't just disappear without consequences. Lisa called around noon, and this time I answered. Dennis, it's chaos here. They've called 3 emergency board meetings since yesterday. Marcus might get fired. I'm sorry to hear that, Lisa. I really am. Are you? Because there's a rumor that you're working with Johnson Industries now. I paused, choosing my words carefully. Lisa, I'm exploring opportunities that value my contributions, just like anyone would after being told they're not good enough. The whole thing is falling apart, Dennis. Without the Johnson contract, they're talking about layoffs. Real ones this time, not just restructuring. That hit me harder than I expected. Lisa was a good person, a single mom who'd worked her way up from an entry-level position. She didn't deserve to pay for Marcus's arrogance. Lisa, send me your resume. Johnson Industries is expanding rapidly. 2 weeks later, I started my new position as Director of Business Development at Johnson Industries. The office culture was everything Morrison and Associates wasn't. Collaborative, merit-based, focused on results rather than appearances. My first day, Mr. Johnson himself walked me around the office, introducing me to everyone from senior executives to administrative staff with the same level of respect. "People," he announced during the company meeting, "I want you to meet Dennis Thompson. He's going to be leading our expansion into new markets, and I want you to know that he's here because of his character and capabilities, not because of where he went to school." The applause was genuine, warm. Several people approached me afterward to share their own stories about being underestimated because of their backgrounds. I realized I wasn't just starting a new job. I was joining a community that actually lived the values they claimed to espouse. Meanwhile, the implosion at Morrison and Associates was swift and brutal. Without the Johnson Industries contract, their cash flow projections collapsed. The board of directors demanded answers, and Marcus became the obvious scapegoat. Within a month, he was gone, along with 2 other executives who'd supported the restructuring. But here's what surprised me. I felt no satisfaction in Marcus's downfall. When Lisa called to tell me he'd been fired, I mostly felt sad that it had come to this. Sad that his arrogance had hurt so many people. Sad that he'd probably never understand what he'd really lost. "The new interim CEO wants to talk to you," Lisa said. "He's hoping Johnson Industries might reconsider." "Lisa, tell him I appreciate the thought, but some bridges can't be rebuilt. Mr. Johnson's decision isn't about money. It's about trust." The irony wasn't lost on me. The same company that had dismissed me as adequate was now begging for a second chance they'd never given me. 3 months into my new role, something unexpected happened. My phone rang during Emma's soccer practice, and I almost didn't answer. I'd made a promise to be present for my family. But the caller ID showed Marcus Williams. "Dennis? It's Marcus. I was hoping we could talk." He sounded different, humbled. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that might have been genuine remorse. "What can I do for you, Marcus?" I wanted to apologize. "What I did to you was wrong, and I've had a lot of time to think about it since everything fell apart." I watched Emma sprint down the field, her ponytail flying behind her, and felt a peace I hadn't experienced in years. "I appreciate that, Marcus. I lost everything, Dennis. My job, my reputation. But worse than that, I lost my integrity. I let politics and appearances matter more than doing what was right. What are you doing now?" "I'm teaching business ethics at a community college. The irony isn't lost on me." He paused. "Dennis, I know I don't deserve to ask, but is there any chance? Could you put in a word for me somewhere? I'm not looking for anything fancy. I just want to work again." The old me might have felt vindicated by his desperation. But sitting there, watching my daughter play soccer, knowing I'd be home for dinner, knowing I worked for people who respected me, the anger was gone. "Send me your resume, Marcus. I can't promise anything, but I know some smaller firms that might be interested in someone with your experience." The silence stretched long enough that I thought the call had dropped. "You'd do that? After everything?" "Marcus, I don't want to see anyone unemployed. But if you get another chance, remember this feeling. Remember what it's like to have your worth questioned. Maybe use that to be better." 6 months later, Johnson Industries had grown by 40%, largely due to the relationships and deals I'd brought over. Emma's piano recital was a huge success. I was indeed front row center, recording every note on my phone. Sarah had started her own consulting business with the financial security my new position provided. And Marcus? He'd found a position at a mid-sized firm, starting over at a fraction of his previous salary. But according to Lisa, who joined our team at Johnson Industries, he was apparently a completely different manager. Supportive, collaborative, focused on developing his people rather than impressing his superiors. The real victory wasn't in Marcus's downfall, or even in my career advancement. It was in Emma's art project, displayed proudly on our refrigerator. She'd drawn our family at the dinner table, all of us together, with a caption in her 7-year-old handwriting, "My daddy learned how to come home." One evening, as I was tucking Emma into bed, she asked me something that stopped me cold. "Daddy, why were those people at your old job so mean to you?" I sat on the edge of her bed, choosing my words carefully. "Sometimes, sweetheart, people make the mistake of thinking that where you come from is more important than who you are. That's silly. Yes, it is. But it taught Daddy something important." "What?" "That your worth isn't determined by what other people think of you. It's determined by how you treat others and whether you keep your promises." She nodded solemnly, then brightened. "Like how you promised to come to my recital and you did." Exactly like that. As I turned off her light and headed downstairs, I found Sarah waiting for me with 2 cups of coffee and that smile I'd fallen in love with 12 years ago. "Penny for your thoughts?" I sat beside her on the couch and pulled her close. "Just thinking about how sometimes losing everything is the only way to find out what really matters." "Any regrets?" I thought about Marcus, probably grading papers at his community college, learning to rebuild his career from the ground up. I thought about my former colleagues at Morrison and Associates, many of whom had landed on their feet but were working for a company that would never be the same. I thought about Mr. Johnson, who'd risked a business relationship to make a point about character and integrity. "No regrets," I said finally. "Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is someone showing you exactly who they are. It saves you from wasting years trying to earn respect from people who were never going to give it." The next morning, I woke up naturally instead of to an alarm clock. Another small luxury of a job that valued results over FaceTime. Over breakfast, Emma asked if she could bring me to school for career day. "What would you tell them about your job, Daddy?" I thought about it as I watched her carefully spread peanut butter on her toast. I'd tell them that the most important thing isn't getting the job you want. It's becoming the person who deserves respect wherever they go. That sounds smart. It took me a long time to learn it, sweetheart. But some lessons are worth waiting for. As I dropped Emma off at school and headed to a job where my contributions mattered more than my credentials, I realized something profound. Dennis Thompson from State University was exactly who I was supposed to be. And that was more than enough. The story could have ended there, with the bad guys punished and the good guy vindicated. But real life is messier and more complicated than that. 3 weeks later, I received a call that would test everything I thought I'd learned about forgiveness, second chances, and the true meaning of success. But that's a story for another day. For now, It was enough to know that sometimes, when people show you who they really are, the best response isn't revenge. It's becoming so successful in your own right that their opinion stops mattering entirely. And tonight, I'd be home for dinner,